There we go. Shalom, everyone. My name is Gidon Ariel, and I am delighted to welcome you to the launch party of the prize-winning story, the newly released book by Ken Reed. No, Ken, don't be embarrassed and hide your face. We'll be able to show the book in a moment. Delighted to welcome you to the launch party of the prize-winning story. Yeah, that's me. I always forget to turn off Zoom once I start it. Yes, so today we will be doing a bunch of interesting things, including, as soon as I can find, we will be talking, of course, telling the story of the book. We will be hearing from two keynote speakers, Ofra Shoshtari, who is the director of the Arts and Culture Initiative for Judea and Samaria, who will be talking about literature and the arts, how they can speak truth in ways that politicians and preachers can't. And we will also be hearing from Paul Rood, who is the Biola University professor and director of the William Blackstone Institute. He is going to be talking about William Blackstone's 1888 trip to Israel and his efforts on behalf of the Jewish state. And of course, we will be hearing from me, who I'm Gidon Ariel. I'm the publisher of Root Source Press, who is the publisher of our newly released book. And last but certainly not least, and not necessarily even last, Ken Reed, who is the author of the prize-winning story. So I said that he's not necessarily last, and I'm going to start by introducing Ken and saying good morning to you. Of course, it's morning here in Israel. How are you? Good evening, Ken.
Yes, good evening. It's a hot California afternoon over here. It's about 90 degrees. But fortunately, we are in air conditioning joy, shall I say. But thank you again, Gidon, for publishing my book and for introducing and hosting this event. I've been to a number of events that Gidon has hosted, and he is a polished MC and very accomplished. And if you haven't checked it out before, check out rootsource.com, root-source.com, because this is not only a publishing house, but also an NGO, a non-governmental organization that Gidon and his partner, Bob Odell, who lives in Austin. Bob is a Christian. Gidon is an Orthodox Jew. And together they put together this wonderful website and organization that introduces Jewish thinking, especially to Christian audience.
Yes, and thank you very much for that unrequested introduction. But while you're having it, I'm going to share the screen of our website. As you said, it's rootsource.com. And as we claimed, the Root Source slogan is God, Jews, Christians, Torah, respect, love. I hope you know what at least 5 out of 6 of those words mean. And let's see. Oh, come on. This thing sometimes moves and sometimes it doesn't. I've got to do it this way. Yeah, so Root Source is a labor of love. It's a gift from Jews to Christians around the world. And it's Jews and Christians studying the common roots of their faith together. Today we have, here is a picture of about 10 of our Orthodox Israeli Jewish teachers. Today we have closer to 20. We have on the average 50 recorded lessons from each of these teachers, altogether over 1,000 lessons recorded on topics such as women in the Bible, the Holy Temple, and the weekly portion, Jewish history, biblical Hebrew, Jewish prayer, all sorts of things that my Jewish faculty is interested, willing, and excited to teach to Christians who are interested in learning from them. This is a new thing, relatively, only the first time in about 2,000 years, that Christians are interested in learning from Jews, and Jews are interested in teaching those Christians. We're talking about 1% of each of those populations, but it's a start. And even still, we're talking about a few millions of people, or at least a few million Christians, a few dozen Jews. But that's the way we start, as the Bible says, not because the Jews are the largest of nations. We are, in fact, the smallest of nations. But how did my grandmother like to say? It's not the quantity, it's the quality. So I'm very happy to be with a bunch of my friends here tonight and a bunch of my friends that I don't know yet. I'd like to give a little another little public service announcement and say that anybody is not only invited, but vigorously invited to send me an email, and I would be happy to have to be in touch with you. So let us see what we can do about tonight. What do you think, Ken? Shall we get started?
I think so.
Okay, so with your permission, we are going to see that we have Paul's. I'd like to introduce Paul Ruud. Paul Ruud, as I said, is the Ken, would you like to introduce him, or shall I just read the introduction that I have all set up over here?
Go ahead.
You want me to introduce myself? I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much. So let me stop sharing the screen here. And in a moment, I'll start sharing the screen with your presentation. So you get started with that, and I'll tell you. And when you see your presentation on the screen, then you know that you can start your presentation.
Okay.
Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm an underemployed senior citizen living in California, but my wife and I taught at Biola University, a Christian college in Southern California. My wife actually is the tenured professor, now the emeritus professor of history. And after my career in business, I taught there for about 15 years in economics, history, and politics. And I become more of a historian. And that's why I'm here tonight, to tell a little bit of a story.
Very good. And I'm very happy to say that we are ready to begin. So it's going to be a little bit, not impossible, but a little hard for me to look at both your text and your presentation in order to move it. So give a little ding at the end if you see that I'm not catching up. Okay, Paul?
Very good.
Very good. Okay, so let us then begin.
When I read Ken's draft manuscript of his novel, The Prize-Winning Story, I was convinced that I was a composite of several characters in Pastor Vladdy's tour bus. Being the prodigal son of a Baptist minister myself, who grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and finally, nearing the age of 30, came to embrace the faith, as the Apostle Paul describes, of a wild branch grafted into the olive tree of faith in the God of Israel. My wife, Judith, was a natural olive branch, raised in a Holocaust survivor, conservative Jewish home, who became a follower of Yeshua about the time that I did. She'd first gone to Israel with her United Synagogue youth group after her bat mitzvah, and then again for a year of college in the Hebrew University one-year program. Next. Shortly after our marriage, while in graduate school at the University of Chicago, we both moved to Israel for another year and a half of study while Judith was doing her PhD field research in Arabic and Turkish law cases from the Muslim Sharia court on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. She was the first Jewish woman to be given the permission to do so from the Jordanian and Muslim authorities.
Just one second. Is that your wife, Judith, in the picture?
That's Judith. 35 years ago.
That is just amazing. I mean, she looks great in this picture, but it looks like it's from 135 years ago.
It does, yeah. Not so. Yeah, that's in the Sharia court in East Jerusalem.
That is amazing. Wow, I'm going to have to talk to you offline about that. One second.
Next slide. Later, we brought our two sons, Sam and Joshua, to study Hebrew with us at the Ulpan Akiva, an intensive Hebrew language school. And our youngest son's bar mitzvah was conducted at the ancient ruins of the synagogue at Chorazin, one of the Galilee villages where Yeshua taught.
That is pretty amazing. I would say that's more than 99.9% of Jews have managed to do their bar mitzvah in Israel. That's really impressive.
We brought several tour groups of college students to Israel, and as historians and teachers, we visited the places and taught the historical events of the biblical and historical records. These are experiences that have shaped our lives and the lives of our students, and very similar to the stories in Ken's novel. I feel that these present day stories also resonate with the story of another American evangelical Christian who undertook a pilgrimage to the Holy Land 130 years ago. Born in 1841, William E. Blackstone had from his youth led a disciplined life of prayer and Bible study, serving as a chaplain's aide during the Civil War, later a successful businessman and leader of a circle of other godly businessmen in Chicago who met regularly to pray for and support the work of a young street evangelist in Chicago named D.L. Moody. At the age of 45, Blackstone experienced a profound sense of calling to a life of prayer, study, and public Bible teaching. He and his wife prayed and fasted for days to seek God's direction, reaching the decision to give away their luxurious Gilded Age mansion for use as an orphanage and investing their savings in an urban rescue mission, a school for Black freedmen, and a missionary clinic in India. His serious study of scriptural texts also convinced him of the literal restoration and salvation of the Jewish nation for a central role in God's final plan of history. His book outlining his prophetic interpretations, Jesus is Coming, became one of the best-selling books of the 19th century, translated into 48 languages and sold several million copies. Blackstone's opinions ran counter to the mainstream views of modernist Christianity in his day, which was a Christianity confident in itself and in its Christian civilization, which they believed was enough to lead mankind to progress and prosperity. Instead, Blackstone saw the Christian church as proud, weak, and unaware that it was dying from modernist and humanistic thinking from within. Blackstone saw that mankind individually and collectively was doomed without God's grace, man's repentance, and God's action to bring forth his judgment. And out of that judgment, the repair of the world through the kingdom of the Messiah. For nearly 5 decades, Blackstone preached this message in the pulpit of any denomination that would invite him throughout the country and around the world. In 1888, Blackstone took his 19-year-old daughter, Flora, with him to a missionary conference in London. And from there, they planned to journey on through to Europe and Istanbul, and then on to the Holy Land. The trip itself took 9 months, traveling by ocean, steamer, rail, and transport schooner down the Mediterranean coast to the port of Jaffa.
Amazing.
Blackstone's daughter, the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria were at the time under Ottoman Muslim rule and had been for 4 centuries. Scattered enclaves of Jews and Syrian and Armenian Orthodox Christians had continued in the trading ports of Jaffa, Haifa, Akko, and the religious communities of Jerusalem, Safed, Tiberias, Nazareth, and Bethlehem. Blackstone's daughter, Flora, kept a detailed daily journal of their journey, supplemented frequently by long addendums by her father. In contrast to Mark Twain's dismal and desolate literary descriptions of 20 years earlier, a portion of which Twain's cynical comments regarding the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is recounted in Ken's book, Blackstone's journal, by comparison, is filled with wonder, excitement, and deep spiritual meditation. In the Holy Land, travel was difficult and dangerous, typically by horse-drawn carriage or on horseback or even camel caravan.
I'm looking at this picture and wondering if this is the road to my home today.
I understand it to be the road from Jaffa past Abu Ghosh up to Jerusalem.
It's very hard to tell because Israel today so miraculously is so built up that there are very few areas that are like this that are like this today. You know, when you have a bald baby, they all look the same. When they start growing a little hair, you can tell the difference between them.
Good
So
point.
this is the way that the bald view of the land of Israel looked over 100 years ago.
That's right. Arriving at Jerusalem, they looked forward to staying with their dear friend from Chicago, Horatio and Anna Spafford. Horatio Spafford had been part of Blackstone's prayer circle in Chicago. Several years earlier, 3 of Spafford's 4 children perished when their passenger liner sank while crossing the Atlantic. In mourning, Spafford wrote the beloved hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul." He later sold all his possessions and headed to the Holy Land to establish a witnessing mission that became known as the American Colony. In the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of Jerusalem, near the Damascus Gate, which is now a swank hotel favored by diplomats and journalists. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, Blackstone learned that his dear friend Horatio had died of typhus just days before.
Oh my gosh.
Spafford's daughter Bertha wrote a widely read history of the American colony in which she related that, quote, "Despite the sad circumstances, the Blackstones were our guests at the American colony, and mother was very pleased to see them." The Spafford's adopted son, Jacob, an orphaned Yemenite Jew, served as the Blackstones' tour guide. Before Jacob's adoption by the Spafford family, he had been a student in the mission school established by the biblical scholar Conrad Schick. Fluent in ancient Hebrew, Arabic, and 5 modern languages, Jacob became a renowned explorer and guide in his own right.
Is it just, I'm interested in this picture. Is this the Spafford family? What is this picture? You know?
It is Horatio and Anna Spafford and other members of the American colony in the courtyard of the American Colony Hotel today.
So I'm guessing that we have this hat over here with this beard in the picture on the side. And over here on the picture on the other side, you have one man with such a picture who looks a little bit older. Could that be Spafford and a little bit slimmer? Is that Spafford in that picture, do you think?
No, Spafford is sitting right next to the fountain, right there. And I think the hat is just similar. That's not Jacob. That picture of Jacob there would be a little bit later.
So wait a second. So this is actually Jacob Spafford, the adopted son. So he doesn't look very Yemenite, but I'll take your word for
it. Good. You'll have to. It's true.
Wow.
All right. Before he left Jerusalem, Blackstone accompanied Jacob through a secret passage into an immense cave below the Muslim quarter. Known today as Zedekiah's Cave, it was reputed to be the hiding place where the last king of Israel was captured, forced to watch his son's murder, and had his eyes put out by Nebuchadnezzar. The cave had only recently been rediscovered, but was then sealed again by the Turkish authorities. However, Blackstone and Jacob were able to get in and explore the cave, and Blackstone engraved his name and a date into the ancient limestone ceiling, where it is still clearly visible today.
Wait a second. I'm sorry for having to interrupt every time. I guess I'm taking my my MC's prerogative. Is this a picture of Blackstone over here with his group?
No, that's just a picture of the period that was made by others. The inscription of Blackstone's graffiti on the cave underneath was taken by me, in Jerusalem today. You can see it yourself if you go down there. It's really quite a sight.
And that Zedekiah's Cave today is one of the swank. You used the word swank earlier, but it's one of the swankiest places to hold a party and a reception. I've been to a couple of really high quality receptions. They bring in catering over there and lighting. It's a very, very interesting and out of the ordinary place to go.
Very interesting. It's huge. I know. It's very impressive. In her book, Bertha Spafford recounts that during their stay in the American colony, William Blackstone had quote, many conversations with my mother relating how haunted he was by the crowds of poor homeless Jewish refugees that he had recently witnessed seeking departure at the Russian Black Sea ports and other transit points in Eastern Europe. Russian Tsar Alexander's recent anti-Semitic May laws, followed by expulsion orders and violent pogroms, had at the time driven 2 million Jews into exile. Bertha further wrote that Blackstone confided to Anna Spafford his grandest ambition, which was to organize the first world conference between Jews and Christians in order to secure international support for their safety and security.
Wow. This picture you're saying you think is taken in Russia?
I understand that this was part of the pictures taken by the Odessa Committee that was helping these refugees in southern Russia.
Aye.
Blackstone witnessed firsthand the stream of courageous Jewish refugees that were making the difficult journey into the lands of the Ottoman Near East. The year Blackstone visited the Holy Land, a movement called the Hovevei Zion, the Lovers of Zion, had begun purchasing land and building agricultural communities for Jewish refugee resettlement in Palestine. Leon Pinsker, an organizer of this refugee relief and proto-Zionist movement based in Odessa, sought financial support from Baron Rothschild to assist nearly 25,000 Jewish refugees to resettle in early agricultural settlements on land purchased on the coast of Palestine. Blackstone visited the newly established communities of Petah Tikva, Rishon LeZion, and was inspired by the organizational talent, the energy, and spirit of these new Olim of the first Aliyah. The Ottoman Turkish government initially favored these new developments. However, local Arab opposition influenced the Ottoman government to block further Jewish immigration after 1890.
So this, I'm thinking, is a picture of the Jewish settlers in Rishon LeZion, would you say?
It is.
Am I right? Very good. 1 out of 3 ain't bad. Okay. Wow.
Upon his return in 1890, Blackstone met individually with many of the rabbis of Chicago, who were disarmed by his humble and charitable spirit and charmed by his knowledge of Hebrew scripture. In each meeting, Blackstone related his recent experiences concerning the plight of Jewish refugees fleeing Eastern Europe, the spiritual energy and success apparent in the new settlements in the Holy Land, and his conviction that divine forces were now at work to bring about the restoration and redemption of the Hebrew nation in their ancient homeland. Rabbi Abraham Lesser of Chicago's largest Orthodox congregation and founding president of the Union of Orthodox Rabbis has left us a personal account of his encounter with Blackstone in 1890. The rabbi writes, "In reality, it never entered my mind to investigate this subject of Israel's future hope, to fathom the deep thought and to ask questions. In my simple faith, I hoped for the day of salvation in the same manner as my ancestors did, in hope while the Messiah tarries. But William Blackstone, this prominent Christian clergyman, a wise, wealthy, and respected man, came and told me in a very pleasant manner that he is a friend of Israel and that he positively believes in the return of the children of Israel to Palestine. In his travels through the Holy Land, he beheld the great improvements of the roads, how the scattered Israelites were gathered there to till the soil, and his heart told him that the time of mercy had arrived. By the aid of kings and princes, the children of Israel would now surely return to their land, and that it was my duty to help him support this great project. From the very start, his proposition did not inspire me very much, and I hardly felt inclined to undertake such a great task. The fact is, I did not place much confidence in his words, and it did not seem to me that he was the man to bring salvation to Israel. I hesitated in my heart for fear it might cause more harm than good, but he urged me day after day, and I finally reconsidered the matter. Rabbi Lesser then relates how Blackstone joined his family at their next Passover meal, partook of the entire ceremony with great understanding and reference, and then inspired Rabbi Lesser to write a book regarding the Orthodox Jewish understanding on the restored Messianic kingdom of the last days. Lesser soon became a revered leader of the Mizrahi, the Orthodox Jewish movement in support of Zionism. Reform Judaism, which represented 80% of the American Jewish population, were repelled by the idea of a national restoration in Palestine. Most were in agreement with the Pittsburgh Platform of Reform Judaism, which in 1885 adopted the position that, quote, "We consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore we expect neither a return to Palestine nor any of the laws concerning a Jewish state." However, there was one prominent Reform rabbi in Chicago who responded positively to Blackstone's call. Rabbi Bernhard Felsenthal, whose congregation of recent immigrants had made him urgently aware of the humanitarian catastrophe that was facing East European Jewry, supported Blackstone's call for a Jewish national homeland as a moral and spiritual imperative. Later that year, Blackstone invited over 50 speakers and hundreds of official attendees representing all Christian and Jewish denominations and perspectives to the first interfaith Jewish Christian conference in America, which he called the Conference on the Past and Future of Israel. The program circular stated, "The object of this conference is to give information, promote a spirit of inquiry on the basis of mutual kindness between Jews and Christians." Each group was asked to lead in prayers, psalm singing, and readings from Hebrew scripture. Blackstone brought the two-day conference to a conclusion with an affirmation by the audience of a resolution calling upon the Christian leaders to repent of historic anti-Semitism and unanimously pass a resolution of sympathy with the oppressed Jews of Russia, and called upon the President of the United States to confer with world leaders concerning the condition of the Jews in modern nations and the possibility of opening a way for their restoration to Palestine. Affirming the shared Judeo-Christian biblical heritage, the resolution concluded, quote, "In the name of God and in the name of the common brotherhood of man, we petition world leaders to stay the hand of cruelty from this time-honored people, which have given them, as well as us, our Bible, our religion, and our knowledge of God." Encouraged by the positive experience of the Jewish-Christian dialogue, but dissatisfied with the lack of support from the Jewish participants for the restored Jewish national home in Palestine, Blackstone proceeded to prepare a concrete written argument and plan in a memorial petition to be presented to the President of the United States, Benjamin Harrison.
This is just absolutely fascinating that this, thank you very much for putting this important historical document right here on the screen, this conference, which was held in 1890, and it just screams out that this was 7 years before the first Zionist Congress.
It is.
But that's in some way what it was. But my noticing eye notices that Rabbi Lesser is not mentioned on the program here. Can you say something to that?
He signed the petition, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but he would not appear in the program. He felt that as an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, it was fruitless for him to engage in dialogue with either Reform Jews or Christians. He felt at the time it would be fruitless.
I'll take your word at face value, fruitless, but I think it would be more than fruitless. It would be sour fruit, because it would really make everybody think he was totally, all of his Orthodox friends make him think totally crazy. This is something that the Jewish people has been dealing with to this very day, and more so perhaps even. I guess I'll interrupt here that yesterday, Dr. Rood, interrupted my day because once you mentioned Rabbi Abraham Gershon Lesser in your materials that I peeked at yesterday, that I started looking at him all throughout the internet and other things, and I came up to about 3 or 4 hours of doing a little internet research, i.e. Googling, and I saw that he was a tremendously amazing rabbi in those times, something really worth a lot more study. And his book that you mentioned already in your presentation, that he was encouraged to write by Blackstone, is published and is available on the internet in both Hebrew and in English. So I got a chance to look at it, but not to really read it. But I will definitely try to send you and everybody else on this presentation a link to that book. Very, very, very fascinating. Over 100 years ago, over close to 150 years ago, so providential and so prophetic what was going on then.
The Blackstone Memorial Petition of 1891 was an accomplishment which literally changed history. Marlon Feinstein's foundational work, American Zionism, 1884 to 1904, devotes an entire chapter to the Blackstone Memorial and concludes that, quote, "The fact remains, no 19th century document dealing with the Jewish question in Palestine, including Herzl's Jewish State, evoked as much editorial response in this country as Blackstone's memorial." In 1891, Blackstone held 5 regional meetings in Chicago, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, and scheduled over 250 individual appointments to make his case, all without an organization or even a secretarial assistant supporting him. Gentile opinion leaders were often indifferent to the humanitarian issues and disbelieving of any biblical prophetic promises concerning a restoration of the Jewish nation to their homeland, believing it a Jewish dream. Many prominent Christian leaders refused to sign, saying they'd asked their Jewish friends about the idea of a homeland for Jewish refugees in Palestine, and their Jewish friends were adamantly opposed to it, believing it would undermine their efforts to assimilate into full members of American society. Nevertheless, by force of his incredible personal energy, tactful diplomacy, and unwavering faith, Blackstone obtained the support and signature of 413 notable citizens. The list of initial signers included 53 newspaper editors, 7 college presidents, the industrialists Rockefeller, Morgan, McCormick, Armour, Dodge, and Scribner, the Chief Justice and 22 federal and state jurists, the Speaker of the House and 8 other members of Congress, the governors of Massachusetts, New York, and Illinois, and the mayors of New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. As well, 17 rabbis and 28 Jewish community leaders, and over 200 Protestant and Catholic denominational leaders. Blackstone then presented his petition to President Benjamin Harrison and Secretary of State Blaine. The following year, President Harrison did mention the plight of the Russian Jews in his State of the Union address to Congress. And Secretary of State James Blaine did send a proposal to America's ambassadors to Russia and the Ottoman Empire for comment. Both responded negatively. But for the next 25 years, the American government gave little diplomatic energy toward the support of a Jewish national homeland. Blackstone, nevertheless, continued to present his petition to Presidents Cleveland and McKinley, and again to Theodore Roosevelt after the Kishinev pogroms of 1903 and 1905. In 1902, Blackstone relocated to Los Angeles, where he continued lecturing in churches and Bible conferences. He partnered with the successful petroleum pioneer and Christian businessman Lyman Stewart in founding the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, which later became Biola University, where my wife and I later taught during the last 2 decades. Lyman and his brother Milton entrusted Blackstone as trustee of their personal estate of considerable wealth for the translation and distribution of the Bible and the establishment of Bible institutes in China and Korea. There, Blackstone spent 5 years between 1909 and 1914. And during this time, he continued to write letters home to many, including President Wilson and the Archbishop of Canterbury, warning of a strong premonition of God's impending judgment and dramatic international events, which he believed could likely begin in 1914, that he believed would shake the world powers and result in events opening up the beginning of a restoration of the Jewish nation in their homeland.
Amazing.
Blackstone remained an enigma to most Jews, as many Christian Zionists still do today. It took a special man, the New York businessman, philanthropist Nathan Strauss, to understand the sincere motivations of Blackstone and to bring Blackstone's work once again to the attention of a new Jewish Zionist leadership, including Rabbi Stephen Weiss and Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who both warmly embraced Blackstone, showing respect for his sincere evangelical Protestant beliefs. In 1916, Louis Brandeis introduced Blackstone to the annual American Zionist Conference as the father of Zionism and asked him to reissue his 1891 Blackstone Memorial to President Wilson, because it was, in his view, the best expression of human rights claims for a secure Jewish national homeland.
So this picture is in 1916. This is Justice Brandeis, and here he is in the middle, I'm guessing. And this is Nathan Strauss on the
No.
side, and so that is Blackstone. Have I got it right?
No, Nathan Strauss is on the left, and Rabbi Wise is on the right.
And Brandeis is in the middle.
Brandeis is in the middle. Blackstone is not in the picture.
Okay, but
And another picture of Brandeis on the right.
yes. Fascinating. Just
Blackstone,
one second.
Yeah.
Nathan Strauss also founded the Israeli city of Netanya, which is
Yeah.
named for him. Netanya. Netanya means prayer, blessing of God. And he was saved from the Titanic. He missed the boat. He missed the boat, the Titanic, and his brother, who was also a magnate, didn't miss the boat and was killed in the Titanic. And so he's got a very important part in Israeli and Zionist history. I mentioned that he started the city of Netanya. So that's his first name, Nathan, but his last name, Strauss, is also very, very, very famous in Israel. It is one of the top 5 biggest companies in Israel. It is a dairy company, and today a food conglomerate, the Strauss conglomerate. His granddaughter, I'm guessing, Oprah Strauss, is one of the richest women in Israel today.
how interesting. And here in New York, he was known as the founder and president of Abraham and Strauss and Macy's.
Wow.
He also, interestingly, was tutored in Hebrew by a Presbyterian minister, because his father located to Georgia, and there were no Jewish rabbis within 100 miles. So he went to the local Presbyterian minister who knew Hebrew and entrusted him with his sons, which is quite.
And it's just amazing that from such a zero Jewish and Zionist upbringing, Nathan Strauss became one of the most important Zionists in history, which just goes to show you that if God wants, even a broom can shoot.
A very great man. Blackstone also obtained the endorsement of the General Assemblies of the Methodist, Episcopal, and Presbyterian churches, which Brandeis and others believed was essential for obtaining Wilson's diplomatic message to the British government, providing American approval to move forward with the Balfour Declaration of November 1917, ensuring British and Allied support for the establishment of a Jewish homeland. A month later, British forces captured Jerusalem from the Turkish forces, enabling the establishment of the Palestine Mandate. I was so pleased that former Israeli ambassador Dr. Michael Oren, as a historian, diplomat, and statesman, highlights Blackstone's story in his introduction and in the body of his book, Power, Faith, and Fantasy, America in the Middle East, 1776 to the President. Orrin views Blackstone as the archetype of the man of faith who shaped the ongoing relationship between Christians and Jews in America, and the humanitarian and natural rights case for the restoration of the Jewish homeland in the Middle East. In his conclusion, Orrin states that the vision of Blackstone, the man of faith, and Brandeis, the man of power, was realized in the renewed Jewish statehood. In 2016, 125 years after his 1891 memorial petition to President Harrison, and 100 years after his reissued 1916 memorial petition to President Wilson, Israeli diplomats and Jewish leaders joined with me, Blackstone family members and invited guests, to honor Blackstone at his gravesite at the Forest Lawn Cemetery outside of Los Angeles. Ambassador Michael Orrin traveled to Los Angeles to deliver the keynote address, but was recalled to Israel the night before due to the sudden passing of former Prime Minister Shimon Peres, the last of Israel's statesmen from the founding generation. Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein, Director of Interfaith Affairs of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, praised Blackstone's devotion to the Word of God, his compassion for the Jewish people, and his humanitarian courage to do the right thing, stating, quote, he's referred by some as the father of Zionism, advocating for the Jewish homeland 5 years before Theodor Herzl wrote Der Judenstaat.
Absolutely fascinating.
Israel's Consul General in Los Angeles, Sam Grundweg, spoke on behalf of Ambassador Orrin with the same historic and respectful words he would have delivered. He stated, history has not given enough credit or attention to Blackstone or his contribution to Zionism, which is why we are here today to commemorate his legacy and to pay tribute to his immeasurable contributions to the Jewish people in the creation of the modern state of Israel. It is why, for me, as the official representative of the state of Israel, to stand here and pay that tribute, it is a great honor and a tikkun, a correction of the lack of attention and credit that he so much deserved and his legacy deserved. Other dignitaries and religious leaders spoke as one. After the hour-long commemoration, a long processional of cars drove to William Blackstone's gravesite. A wreath from the State of Israel was laid jointly by Consul General Grundweg and a member of Blackstone's family on his humble grave marker. Psalms were read, memories shared, and a hymn was sung by Jews and Gentiles together.
Fascinating.
Last slide. Another commemoration event was held at Biola University. During the 80 years since Blackstone's passing in 1935, his name and story had largely vanished from Biola's memories and even its own published history. He had become a forgotten founder for nearly all. The task of us historians is to discover, teach, and remember the history that is truly important. So it became a project for us, my wife and I, to restore William Blackstone's memory at Biola. And we could not have been more pleased when Biola's Board of Trustees decided to honor his memory with the construction and dedication of a new dormitory, William Blackstone Hall. Over 20 of William Blackstone's grandchildren and great-grandchildren joined in the celebration. As the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote in one of his weekly portions, quote, in an age in which computer and smartphone memories have grown so fast, from kilobytes to megabytes to gigabytes, human memories have nevertheless become so foreshortened. And the important messages and memories still have to be taught. In other words, they can't be Googled. They have to be shared. and experienced in real time and place and heard. You can't delegate that to machines. You have to renew it regularly and teach it to the next generation. This is why pilgrimages conducted by pastors like Pastor Vladdy to the historical and sacred sites in biblical Israel, and tour guides like Ellie, lectures, museums, and learning and sharing with fellow pilgrims is so important. It's also why authors of books like The Prize-Winning Story, who celebrate and share this learning process, are also very important, should be celebrated.
Thank you very, very, very much, Dr. Rood. That was, I can only speak for myself because the way that Zoom is, you can only see one person at a time when somebody else is sharing the screen. But I'm guessing that other people were as astonished as I was about the story that you just told. And I'm very, very pleased to meet you again. We're friends, and it's time to renew that friendship, hint, hint. But the presentation that you made was very, very exciting in this time. It really woke me up, and very, very worthwhile, I believe, for everybody else to hear. Ken, have you got any comments on that before we go to the next part of our presentation?
Absolutely. Dr. Paul, that was just fantastic. It was a reminder of, as you said, one of the major tasks of the historian is to bring to life parts of our history and people that sort of went out of style or popularity or whatever, but have such a relevant message as William Blackstone has for us on, and it reminds me of, the power of one individual. We sometimes feel like, well, I'm only one person, wow, look what this man accomplished. He contributed so greatly to the vision, and even at the presidential level, with Benjamin Harrison and William Woodrow Wilson, bringing the message that the Jewish state could happen, and made it a reality. It's fascinating, and thank you for that, Paul. I love it. I love your research. I love your research mind. It's great.
Thank you. And you can tell why I loved your book so much, because it shows the importance of the Christian tourist to Israel. It can change the world.
Yeah. Well, for those who haven't seen it, Paul's quote is in the front of my book because he and Judith made some very astute comments about how they saw themselves in the book. Thank you for that too.
I'd like to pick up on that and mention something that I should have mentioned earlier, and that is that, first of all, let me share the screen here 1 second. This is the product page where you can a portal to buy the book. Here is the cover of the book in case anybody here hasn't seen it. If anybody here has not bought the book yet, you can get a special prize-winning story and the prize-winning purchase if you purchase the book today. As we mentioned, let's see if we got it here. 1 second. Yeah, what you can do if you buy the book today or within 24 hours, I will personally give you a one-on-one 30-minute Zoom meeting to discuss why I believe Jesus has something to teach Christians, or I will give you a free personal 2-hour on-foot tour of the city of Hebron when you come to Israel. So I don't think there's ever been a perk like that delivered if somebody buys a book, which of course is still, I believe we've got something like about a 15% off or something like that. The price is going to be going up soon as well. So if anybody here has not yet bought that, let me put the link to that page so that you can go to it and buy the book as you wish. Just 1 second. Actually, put that in the chat over here. And while you guys are thinking about that, we're going to go on to our second keynote speaker. I'd like to introduce Ofra Shosh-Tari, who is a friend of mine. She lives here in Israel, but not everybody is as crazy as me to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning for this presentation. So we have her comments pre-recorded. So without further ado, let me get that open. This is not it. Maybe this is it. Yeah. And I will
while you're
optimize.
doing that, Gidon, let me just remind everybody that Gidon it's 5 o'clock in the morning in Israel right now. And this man got up at sometime before 4 o'clock in order to make this happen. And that's the spirit of Gidon. That's what I have come to realize. This man comes through. Look at this, 4 o'clock in the morning, just to host a launch party.
Hi, my name is Ofra Shishtari. I am the founder and curator of Mar'eh, a home for art in Judea and Samaria. I want to thank you for inviting me to this book launch for the prize-winning story, which is really a very interesting concept for a book, and I feel very honored to be invited to be part of this launch. So thank you for that. I was invited to speak a little bit about art in Judea and Samaria and art in general. So I'll tell you first a little bit about who I am and how I came to be here. Obviously, I'm American and I live in Israel, in Judea and Samaria. And how did that happen? So I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and did my first degree at the University of Maryland in museum studies. And I finished in 2008, which was when the economy collapsed. And I had very few job prospects. The Smithsonian's all had hiring freezes. It was a very difficult time. And I lasted a year in America trying, working in a job that was not ideal and doing an internship that didn't pay. And I always wanted to move to Israel. So I decided this is the time. I knew my older brother wanted to come after me, and my parents eventually wanted to retire here. So I had a lot of things going for the move. And I moved to Jerusalem, studied Hebrew, I worked at an art gallery there. And then I moved on to Haifa to do my master's degree, which I did in art history and curation. And I learned a ton about Israeli art history, which my first degree didn't even touch on, and really fell in love with it. And after my degree, I started working at a big commercial art gallery in Tel Aviv called the Gordon Gallery. It's one of the first art galleries that was established in Israel. Very, very successful. And I learned so much there. So that was a really, really interesting experience. And then after that, I went to work at the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. And I worked in the department of exhibitions and collections management. And I got to work with all the curators and see all of the storage rooms and really get to delve into both international and Israeli art in that space. And during that time, I moved to Einav. And the reason I left Netanya and moved to Einav was because there's sort of a housing crisis in Israel, and the housing is very expensive. Young people can't buy. Where we were in Netanya, we would only have been able to afford a small, unrenovated apartment. And then in Einav, we could afford a house with a yard. And we were so lucky to move a year before Corona hit because we have little kids and they got to have a yard during Corona, which we wouldn't have had if we stayed in Netanya. I don't know how I would have survived. And there's also just such a warm community with a wide variety of people here who welcomed us in such an amazing way. I finally really felt part of an Israeli community as opposed to an expat community that I found. And it's just been such a great experience to be here. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I came to start Mar'eh and what we're trying to accomplish. When I first moved to Einav, to my town, I gave a talk to youth here, 16 to 18-year-olds, and I learned that they had never been to an art museum and they didn't know very much about art history, and I was very sad. I worked in the art museum in Tel Aviv at the time, and I saw kids there every day. So I knew this wasn't the norm for Israeli kids. But the more I spoke to people who lived in Judea and Samaria, who grew up here and who have been here for a while, the more I learned this is the norm for Judea and Samaria. And there are several reasons behind that. One of them is the distance. And another one is that they didn't feel like those spaces were welcoming to them, that the galleries and museums in the big cities were very left-leaning, in their politics, had a lot of exhibitions that they felt were inappropriate, a lot to do with the body and the nude, things that I myself are happy to go see as someone who's very involved in the art world, but I can understand why someone who's not involved in the art world would not want to expose themselves and their children to that media. And so I started to do research on whether or not there are artists in Judea and Samaria. I found out that there are tons, which was really a wonderful thing to find out. And I went to tens of studios to visit artists, and I spoke to probably about 60 artists on the phone. I found a Facebook group that already existed and helped it grow. Now there are over 200 people in the group of artists of Judea and Samaria. And I learn about new artists all the time. So these artists also felt that they were sort of excluded from the rest of the art scene in Israel because it's very left wing and they don't want to be associated with people who live in Judea and Samaria. And then I started to do research on whether or not there are spaces in Judea and Samaria that show art, and there is almost nothing. And few tiny little artist-run galleries, and the Castell Museum in Ma'ale Adumim, which is one artist, dead artist museum. So then there's nothing else. There's no modern art gallery anywhere. So in the beginning, since it was Corona, we started with a lot of virtual things online and then through the Facebook group. And then eventually when things opened up more, we had a few in-person meetings with the artists to get a feel for what the artists needed. And as things opened up more, I arranged a meeting with Ariel Development Fund, which the city of Ariel is in the center of Judea and Samaria. It's very large, it has a university. And they are an organization that works to push forward the city and open up new initiatives within the city. They took me on as a project, so I didn't have to open my own nonprofit because they're registered as a nonprofit. And they're helping me make connections within the city, and we found a space, and now we're looking for funding, researching grants and writing grants, and also turning to the city to see what they can provide in terms of funding. And once we have the funding, we'll start renovating the building, which needs some serious renovation, which is a blessing and a curse because it's expensive, but it also means we can make it what we believe will be a great and beautiful functional space. So a lot of exciting things ahead. We're still very much at the beginning, and it's really, really cool. I want to talk to you also about some of the themes that you see in the art in Judea and Samaria. There's a lot of landscapes, a lot of things that has to do with the land. People here are very connected to the land, and sometimes it's just, very, very beautiful. And sometimes it's much more emotional, expressive, getting into their personal connection to this land. And it can even have elements of trauma, since the land throughout its history, including its recent history, has gone through some very violent and difficult times. And so it's very, very interesting. And there are also a lot of Bible connections within the artworks. And I wanted to show you a few of the artist images, just a taste. So this is Mark Provosor from Shiloh. He is a very interesting artist because his day job is to be a security expert. And so he makes some of these beautiful landscapes. Some of them are anthropomorphic landscapes where you can sort of see the hills look like a person's body. Some of them are just very straightforward, beautiful landscapes of Judea and Samaria. And some of those works are very much connected to his personal trauma, all the things that he experienced as a security expert, the terror attacks and the attempts to build bridges with the Arabs on the other side and having those bridges blown up in his face. It's very, very interesting artwork. This is one of my favorite pieces that he did. I love his light. It sort of reminds me of Turner. This is the artwork by Tamar Rund from Tekoa. She does a lot of landscapes also, but I really was drawn to this cabbage. I liked how much expression she was able to put into such a simple vegetable. She does a lot of really expressive still lifes. She has a very quick brush and a very active sense of line and color. I love the purple here that you get with the ink. It's really quite beautiful work of such a simple subject. It's a photograph by an artist named Efrat Burrell that lives in my town in Einav. She did a series of photographs of women who work and who have children and are religious, and balancing sort of all of those balls in the air. And this woman is named Mitav. She's what's called a Yoetzet Halacha, which is a bit like a female rabbi, but they deal with specifically the laws of marital purity. And it's become recently very accepted within the Orthodox world to have women who are experts on the subject, who as a woman I could turn to ask questions on marital purity, and not have to go to a male rabbi, but be able to ask a woman, and it's much more comfortable. She's a very, very wise young woman, and she has 2 little kids as well, and dealing with all those things together. These are works by Nurit Damri, who does print screens, but she started to be curious about how to change a print screen, a print into something that's one of a kind, as prints are usually made many prints. That's sort of the point of prints. So she took the screens themselves that are used in silkscreen prints, and she made them into prints in a very interesting process, a long process. And she does a lot of these things with patterns, a few portraits connected to her personal family history, and the fabrics that are part of her personal family history. And this work is by Hani Cohen Zada from Talmon, who is one of the most well-known and successful of the artists that I've met in Judea and Samaria. This is a work she did during Corona. These are priests who are outside giving the priestly blessing, holding their hand up like, Spock does with the live long and prosper. But they have both hands up, and they issue this blessing under the prayer shawl, where they ask God to bless and protect the Jewish people, which during Corona is sort of at the beginning of Corona, it was a very powerful blessing to share. And also that they were giving this blessing outside was very unusual. It's usually within the synagogue, but because of Corona, they could only have services outside. This last one I'll show you is by an artist named Erica Wise, who lives in Ariel, city where I want to have the gallery. And she does these beautiful landscapes and often inserts her family into it. She's an older artist in her 70s, very experienced, also worked in textiles and has amazing works in textiles as well, but is currently focused on painting. And this is a landscape that she did where in the corner you see her son with her grandson on his back in a carrier hiking. And so it really shows her personal connection to the land by inserting her family into this beautiful landscape, this beautifully rendered landscape. So that's what I'm going to show you for now. And we'll go back to their talk here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the power of art in general, because artists are sort of philosophers and concentrate on one thing and do it over and over and over again, or a few different styles, or a few different ideas, and do them over and over and over again. They really get deep into specific ideas, and then they detach and put it in a public space and allow another person to interpret those ideas. And they really give people the chance to connect with the other and see another human's experience. And they can do that through lots of different kinds of art, not just visual art, but also theater and music and books. And it's really a way to get into another person's soul. I think that's very powerful. And I don't think there's anything else in the world that really has the power, and only human beings are able to do that. And that is really what artists give to the world, is this opportunity to connect with another person's soul. I understand that Root Source was founded to show Christians what they can learn from the Jewish heritage. So I wanted to share with those of you who are part of Root Source, my wish for you is that you come to Judea and Samaria, and that you get to experience my gallery and see the history here, and meet the people, the real people who live here, and talk to us and understand our connection. And if you ever come and you want to have a cup of coffee with me, I would be more than happy to meet with you, hopefully in my gallery or right outside. and get to know you and have you get to know me and what this place is, this beautiful history rich place is all about. Thanks again for inviting me, and I look forward to meeting you in the future.
Toda rabah, Ofra. And we are now going to conclude our event with remarks from our author, Ken Reed. Give me just a second to get that a little bit set up. 1 second. Yeah, go ahead. Ken, can you just what is it called? Unmute yourself while I open up these questions.
Okay, I'm unmuted. And while you're doing that, let me just add, Gidon, that for our listeners, one of the reasons why we asked Ofra Shashtari to speak, maybe our listeners were thinking, they'd only hear from you and me today, but we wanted to talk with a living artist to make the point that the arts have a way of getting into people's hearts when sermons and lectures might not do the job. I was telling somebody about this yesterday, and I said, well, what is it about the arts that does that? And I think it's the arts, meaning music, literature, painting, sculpture, whatever, make us laugh and cry. And while our mouths are open, laughing and crying, truth can flood in there. So
that's beautiful. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you some questions.
Okay, go.
You wrote this book, The Prize-Winning Story. Why did you write it, and who's your target audience?
Okay, great question. So like my main character, Pastor Vladdy, I'm just grieved by 1,600 years of persecution of the Jews, often led by Christian leaders. It's just appalling. This reached its climax in the Holocaust, but it's happening again right now in the streets of London and New York, and it's happening on Facebook and places like that. Our Father God made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and when people talk about Christians replacing the Jews as God's chosen people, and the fancy name for this is replacement theology, we need to say no. God doesn't change his mind. I believe that Christians are the ones who most need to hear this message. They are the prime audience of this book, Christians. I hope, of course, that some Jews will read the book besides you, Gidon. But that's not my primary audience. I think it's Christians that need to hear the message that we have, to use a religious word, we have sinned. We have made a mistake by the attitude and the way we have treated Jews. And I think that God himself is disappointed in that and wants us to change our behavior.
Thank you. We 1 second. We are talking about the book, The Prize-Winning Story, and that's quite an impressive cover that I'm displaying. Oh, that's a little bit too big, bigger than life. Can you tell us about that cover?
Yeah. I discovered this cover while I was looking around for artwork that might illustrate the theme of the book. And there's an artist in London named PJ Crook. She's about same age as I am. She's been painting and is very well known in British galleries and so forth. And this is one of her paintings called The Storyteller. And I think it does. It makes you wonder who. In fact, one of my readers said, I'm trying to identify which of those people is Pastor Vladdy on there.
That's beautiful. Are your characters real? Talking about Pastor Vladdy, are they real or completely made up in your head?
Every one of them is real, Gidon. Every one of them is a real person who I interviewed for this book. However, of course, I disguised both of them. There are 2 or 3 of them whose real names are used in there, and I cite that at the beginning of the book. But every one of those people exists, and they didn't all go to Israel. So I placed some of them in Israel, but their stories are real.
How many, how long did it take you to write that book, Ken?
About 2 years.
2 years. Is that long or short for a book?
For me, that's about average. I mean, I've heard of people like Stephen King, who apparently cranks out, a book every 4 months or 5 months.
Wow.
And then I've heard of other people, who spend their whole lives writing one book, like Don Quixote. And so, oh, Paul, you too? So I think everybody has their own pace, and it has a lot to do with what else is going on in your life.
Thank you. And you say that you've written other books. What are they about?
Well, my other books are all, or 3 of them are historical novels about the Mennonite Amish community in which I grew up. Mennonite Soldier is a story about World War I and how the Mennonites faced that as pacifists, not willing to fight. He Flew Too High is about a church split in 1955, and both my sons, is published in 2016, is a story about family and war in the early Pennsylvania forest of 1755, French and Indian wartime, and how the Mennonites, how Christians in general faced this conflict between over war and peace. In addition to that, I have also worked with an Ethiopian pastor, Pastor Tesfaye Tessema, San Francisco pastor, and he is publishing, I ghostwritten it for him, a book on the children of Ethiopian immigrants and what's it like to be the child of an immigrant in American society. What are some of the challenges you face? Fascinating topic.
And are you working on any other books?
Actually, I am. So you're gonna be some of the first people to hear it. I'm working on a new project right now. I've contracted to write the biography of Salva Kiir, who is the president of South Sudan. Amazing man. If you've seen pictures of him in the news, he's always wearing a black Stetson hat. And so, I mean, why does Salva Kiir and the South Sudanese want this old white guy from California to write a book about Black Africa? I have no idea. Maybe it's because there's so much tribalism in Central Africa. I mean, this is one of the poorest nations in the world, Gidon. It's the most recent nation in the world, 2011. It's also very poor. They deal with a lot of disease like malaria, yellow fever, and all that sort of stuff. But so I'm flying to South Sudan in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I'll be there for a couple weeks. Yeah,
That's absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to see that book and hear more about it. Finally, Root Source Press has publishes books by and for pro-Israel Christians and Jews. What does that mean to you? And would you consider yourself a pro-Israel Christian? And is the prize-winning story pro-Israel?
Wow. Well, I love Israel, Gidon. I loved visiting it. I love Jews, especially warm, friendly Jews like Gidon Ariel. I believe Jews will always be God's chosen messengers, which doesn't take away from the fact that, they need God as much as any of us do. However, novelists don't make good preachers. We really don't. We create stories about our characters, and the characters must be true to who they are, or they won't be believable. So if a character's pro-Israel, you will, and I'm writing about him, he will speak as a pro-Israel. If, on the other hand, he's anti-Israel, and I've got a character like that in the book, he'll come out and speak that way. So don't spend too much time trying to figure out where is Ken Reed in this book. I mean, just engage with the characters, I think. I pray for the success of Israel. Does that make me a pro-Israel Jew? I mean, pro-Israel Christian? I would guess so.
I'd like to encourage you and say it's not just a guess; it's absolutely true. people
Okay.
think, and I'm sure that other people have heard this as well, that to be pro-Israel, then you have to be anti-Palestinian. And most pro-Israel advocates that you will come across, especially Christian pro-Israel advocates, outspoken ones, like from the Christians United for Israel, will definitely say that they are not anti-Palestinian, and just the opposite. Israel itself, Zionism itself, is pro-Palestinian. We are here in order to help the entire region and ultimately the entire world to achieve bigger and better things. And I have a good friend, David Nekrutman, who is obviously a pro-Israel Zionist Jew. He lives here in Netanya, which we mentioned before. And today, while he is one of my mentors in Christian Jewish relations, he has run the Or Torah Stone CJCUC, which is the Christian Jewish Conference for Unity and for Understanding and Cooperation. But most recently, he's been focusing mostly on helping Christians in Bethlehem, bringing them food and other ways to support them. So ultimately, if you're a Zionist, that means that you are pro-human. And we don't like terrorists. Can't say that we like terrorists too much, but the absolute majority of Palestinians are just trying to make a living, and and many of them recognize how helpful Israel is with its difficulties. And this isn't a black and white story; it's like a novel being written. But ultimately the ability to just be friends and try to work things out and try to find the topics that we share in common and that we could promote together is how Israelis and Palestinians can work together and be friends, and bringing it all together, how Jews and Christians can be friends like that as well. So have you got anything left to say, Ken?
I don't. I think we promised our audience that they would have a shot at us. They could ask questions if they wanted to. I'd rather hear from them.
Is there anybody here who's stuck it out with us? Thank you very much. Who's got a question or a comment? Then we'll be happy to field it right now. 5 seconds. Okay, we won't put anybody on the spot. And before we say goodnight, I would like to once again thank everybody for coming. I'd like to encourage everybody who has not yet purchased their copy, then to try to make that copy. And you know what? I'm going to be even more generous, Ken. Everybody who has showed up today, man, you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Really impressive. So I'm going to ask you and encourage you and invite you to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to have that 30-minute meeting with you. Even if you haven't bought the book yet, maybe it'll encourage you to buy the book. So let me put my email over here in the text, in the chat. And please copy that and paste it somewhere, preferably into an email. And I hope to see you all on Zoom and in Israel and in Los Angeles. That is very, once again, thank you again to our speakers, Ofer Shoshtari and Professor Paul Ruud. A very interesting presentation. Again, Paul, you've really given me cheshik. You've really made it, given me the appetite to come visit the West Coast and to visit and pay respects to William Blackstone. So thank you all very much. Have a great day. And this opportunity, I wish you all a happy New Year. It's the Jewish New Year season. We've got the Yom Kippur, the Day of Repentance, coming up in a few days. So I know that I've got a bunch to repent for. And all of you people who are so supportive of Israel and the Jewish people, just like William Blackstone, you've got a little less to repent for. But thank you all very much
So
coming here
Gidon,
today.
if I can just break in here again, I want to also thank you very much, Paul, for your wonderful talk on William Blackstone. Very, very inspiring. Really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be a part of this, and congratulations on this publication, and best wishes for your future publications as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Gidon, I thought you were going to offer that everybody who's stuck it out here not only would be able to talk with you for 30 minutes, but also that you were going to give anybody who had attended this maybe that tour around Hebron. That
No, for that they got to buy the book. Come on.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much. I got to get going. It's time for morning prayer over here. The sun is starting to come up. And once again, thank you all for showing up, and see you and looking forward to hearing your prize winning story. Toda rabah, Ken.
Boker Tov.
Boker tov.